A very warm greeting to everyone, and welcome to Divinity Facilitation. I want to begin by thanking everyone who has turned up, in particular the schools that kept time, unlike the facilitator. And on that note, I want to apologize for a little bit coming late, but all will be okay. Dear students, thank you, the teachers who have organized, the learners. I can see quite a number of us already there. And in my presentation today, I have chosen to concentrate on the touching papers that largely join us, that is paper 1 and paper 2. I know in your different schools, you have differences of either the third paper being East Africa, paper 3, and others doing paper 4. So being the last slot that will do such a curriculum, I thought in our limited time, I should concentrate on largely the 2, which usually combine a big number of us. So please accept my presentation in that line, because I know very many people will be asking whether I should handle areas to do with other papers. So the limited time I have with teacher Stephen will only enable me to handle Divinity 1 and 2. And I also thought I should begin with the afternoon paper or the next paper called paper 2, because usually when we come out of the room, probably around 11:30, there's that panic that comes when people begin discussing the paper they have done before. So there's limited time that we have, but we need to patch up the gaps. So this afternoon, I've chosen to start with paper 2, and as we shall go on, we shall also handle last the areas of paper 1. So I have made my introduction showing that introduction is now a new area. If you ask your teachers who have taught you, they will tell you that during their time of study, we didn't have introduction in this paper. Straight away, you would go and begin answering. But today it is a new format. But I have said it is usually done majorly in part A. And which introduction I want to say will always depend on the nature of question answered. So I know candidates have a mind of sometimes specializing. For example, in this paper, we have section A as the oral period, and we shall later see that there can never be an area that you specialize in because you don't know what exactly they are going to bring. But when we come to section B of this paper, that is paper 2, you'll see some of you saying, I do not do a number in John, but number 5 and 6 will get you to doing such areas because they are comparative or comparisons. Therefore, I want to emphasize that the introduction will always depend on the part they have given you. So if you are going to do something about the oral period, look out for something they have asked. If it is persecution, your introduction will be defining what persecution is. If it is about the Holy Spirit, your 1.5 line statement will talk about the Holy Spirit in relation. So no one is going to teach you how introduction is done, or you cannot say this is what I will, but it will always depend on the nature of the question asked. And then for that section A, where we are going to choose that one number, which we call the oral period or early church, try to give examples to almost all the majority points you are going to handle. So if you're going to talk about missionary journeys that were carried out, then cite out where. By now, as senior sixes, you should have where such examples exist so that it is not a problem. Examples are necessary. In all presentation the teachers have been giving you, they must have told you that examples are part of this because they enrich our scores or our marks so that your S's does not look that hanging. Then if we are to tabulate differences, do so to allow some bit of comparison so that when you are doing something to do with the John and Mark, which is usually number 5 and 6, of which you're going to select one, or you're comparing the early church, then do your best to ensure that you create differences and similarities between the two. And in particular, if you are doing Mark and John, you must use, for example, the sweetest Bible on earth called the Good News Bible because of its simple English. And look out for how does Mark speak about the triumphant entry. You may find that the triumphant entry, the writer talked about something in a place, yet in another gospel it is talked about differently. That alone allows you to know those headlines that appear similar, and then from there you'll create differences as well. It is imperative for divinity students to be conversant with the Bible so that they do not base on usually the so-called pamphlets only. You must be knowledgeable, because even the people who are going to mark you when they are marking, they actually bring Bibles so that some of the answers will need a reference. So it is very important, because I know that you have now taken divinity. Chances of you doing any religious course at university are high. It will require you to be knowledgeable about the Bible. So let you not be like my other students of probably S4 who only hear of something and they don't know it. For us, being that we are doing a paper 1 and 2, we must have knowledge within the Bible. So do that comparison. Then in this paper, we are going to see that they are going to bring relevancies or application questions, and then you're bound to emphasize using should when answering, so that if they are going to ask about the relevance, that should be one of the things that come with your answers. In some of the answers we shall look at, this will be much emphasized. So for controversy questions, we are meant to use conjunctions or sometimes words that separate some of the answers we are talking about. That is very, very important. And in your papers, I'm sure you must have searched for mocks. You saw some of the people who marked your scripts putting CASH rather, and it was a scoring grade for like the word meaning synthetic handling. So for cases where you are not sure of something, especially when it is related to part B, and you want to give an example about maybe an idea and it is evident, but you are not so sure, you rather use words like alleged, because there are some examples that you may want to give, general examples, and the examiner may question whether you are so factual. So when you make use of alleged, then it is better. Then section A, I made a summary about the areas a senior 6 candidate should really have that allocation of confidence, which included, just like you have seen my shared screen, the oral period, and then I expect you to be very tactical if you're answering methods of transmission. Then students are so nice when it comes to handling contents of charisma, especially some of you who normally go to church. These are things they keep reciting and repeating. And then some people have even reached levels of making charts about them in letters of A up to Z, so that these activities will help you to handle this area. You are going to bring 2 numbers, but you're expected to choose any one. But that is part of what can be brought. if you're handling factors that led to the end of the oral period, it's a good revision for you there. Then if they are going to talk about persecution, revise around why they were persecuted or the effect that comes with it. As we shall see, the persecution kind of thing brought good things and bad ones. So you read about the positive and negative. Then Parousia, the second coming of Jesus, is something that should be in your summary. Then the Holy Spirit, and then the Lord's Supper. If you revise along that line, there's nothing that should scare you when it comes to handling section A. And ahead of me, I have prepared just a few things about this. Then we have section B, where largely concentrates on the two Gospels, and you're lucky that UNEB specifies that you'll handle Mark and John. Of course, ahead of you go to the universities, you'll handle all the 4 Gospels, but here our concentration is Mark and John. So from this area, we all are aware that we are choosing 2 numbers. Instructions are part of what make us to pass. We don't want you to have a question paper where they will write rubric, meaning you are not following instructions. Probably you had interest in section C. In this paper, you know that there is one question that will have to be picked. But here, our concentration should make us revise points concerning general points of, for example, significance of either triumphant entry, of either Jesus's feeding of the multitude, of either how John narrates the story, of like that. So they are what we call general points that even when you're caught off guard, they should be part of your introduction or part of what you start with. So I have hinted on things like messiahship, because both Gospels talk about this. Jesus being shown as the Son of God, it is something that we are going to emphasize. It should be near. And then sometimes both Gospels were trying to show lack of understanding by the disciples at a time when they kept on questioning Jesus of what action he was doing, and the Gospels were showing that the disciples were not having a good understanding about Jesus's ministry. And then some of these were seen being talked about in the Old Testament, so that it brings us to points of fulfillment of the Old Testament scriptures. Then servant of mankind will be something general in all the 2 Gospels, plus Jesus being shown as a human person, that is the humanity. I've even left out things like divinity of Jesus. These should be near you, so that even when you are forgetting or you're scared, which I don't want you to have at this moment, because teachers have done a great job, then they should be near you. In this paper, we shall look out for what we call standpoints, or where you are given tasks of showing which side you are supporting. So in areas where you'll find to what extent was this, and this, please, when you finish defining, giving your introduction, you must show the standpoint. If the extents are there, tell this examiner, to a larger extent, the gospel of this talks about this, and that's what I mean by standpoint. And then afterwards, you don't go on to ask. If you finish that one side, then go to the other side and say, however, to a smaller extent. And this will always depend on what is being actually asked. It is the reason why we need to look out for the questions. And that's why I said it will depend on the nature of the questions, but majority of them come with assessment, where you have to show the extents or to what extent. So this is very crucial, because it is part of what constitutes the SH mark, called synthetic handling. Then we want to look at the nature of questions that you're going to face. given that we are handling an area of how to answer questions. Basically, you'll find questions starting with discuss when it is coming at the beginning, and other times you are going to find questions that have discuss coming at the end. Mind much about these two nature of questions. When discuss comes at the start and they say discuss the significance of this, then you must know that that one is one-sided. So you're not going to talk about anything else. What you're going to talk about is the only thing that they are asking you. But when they bring something and then put the discuss word at the end, even when the marks are 13, please craft it in your mind and know that you're going to talk about two things. We all are now coached well by our teachers that if the marks are 13, there's a mark for the introduction, there's that mark for synthetic handling. Synthetic handling can even include examples. And then later on, you'll look out for a number of between 11 and 10 points raised. But we shouldn't fail when such questions come up at discussion. It is very, very key to look out for some of these. Then in our November exams, we shall find questions that require us to narrate, and that's why I've termed them as narrative questions. Under narrative questions, we shall look out when somebody says, give an account of. That one will call for describing what actually appears or appeared in the gospel you are trying to narrate. If you remember my start, I did tell people that we are supposed to be knowledgeable about the Bible, because now there's no way you're going to run out of such. When you say, me, I don't want to narrate, you may find that part A is asking about narration, but part B is lessons. And then they can say 13 marks for part B. So you are not going to be a coward that for you, you'll never do narration because you are not a setter or item setter that you know that this is going to be picked. So let's train our mind now that we have a whole month to read, to start our exams, to know that when they are given to give an account of it, it's going to be a description, which description will come as either narrated by Mark or John. Then we shall face circumstantial questions. And part of these, we shall have circumstances where you need to at least give just the reasons, especially in the gospel. So when it comes in the gospel, under which circumstance did this and this in Mark, then you know that that one is going to be for narration. Then circumstances which led to this and this in the early church, in most cases, it is going to call for you giving reason. Just give the reasons and you go. The same applies to the epistles. Epistles are the letters. So those circumstantial questions will definitely be something to talk about. Then we have that word justify coming at the end. Someone creates a statement and then says justify. For such questions, you just have to agree to the statement and then move on. Then questions that we call for accounting for. Account for this, as we are going to see them in our presentation here. It just requires you to give reasons. Account for Jesus's calling of disciples. Give reasons why Jesus called up the disciples. So here you are not going to narrate because you are accounting for something. Then we shall have questions that start with comment at the beginning. Please and please, in most cases, it is going to be one-sided. But when comment comes at the end, you are going to look at it in a different way because it will call for almost two sides. Then questions that start with how, then how is more or less in the category of narration, thereby you are going to describe the process of search. Then for questions that will require us to, for such questions, you will be required to illustrate and then eventually give examples. The examples can come from either places these people arrived in all the personalities. If, for example, you are talking about comparisons, you'll have to speak about the gospel, and then you cite out an example about it. Then for comparative questions, like I started it in the beginning, you look out for giving a conjunction, sometimes using than, or sometimes while, if it is differences, like that. So for the gospels, you may find that when they talk about similarities, then you will have to say in both, and then you continue. Then when it comes to a difference, you'll write something and then say while in the other one, something like that. Then we shall have questions that talk about the effects, or sometimes the impact, sometimes the role, sometimes the influence, sometimes the consequences. For such questions, explain the consequences of the Holy Spirit, explain the influence of the persecution, role of this, that, just to know in your mind, it is two-sided. You'll give the positive and then the negative. And in your answering, tell this examiner, don't just come and answer. After you introducing, if you're talking about the Holy Spirit or the Lord's Supper or the persecution, then you have to make that standing line and say, persecution had the following effects, and then you continue like that. Kanoni says, I see your hand, kindly accept my presentation because I came late. Shall handle all your grievances at the end of allocate time. Please accept. Then we shall have the questions in form of assess. That one is definitely two-sided. Any assess question, please do not fail. Then we have a note I have put. I mentioned that if you are handling lessons, it should be linked with what has been asked in a particular part. And sometimes if it is a lesson probably generated from part A, it will require you to compare. Students are failing, like I'll comment about paper one as well, to generate lessons as they are supposed to be. It is the reason why you are supposed to, in most cases, compare them with either words like just as, if it is positive, and then you will say unlike if it is negative. But there are cases where they bring numbers. We shall look at one of the numbers I've prepared for you. I think it was last year's paper. It was talking about Peter, if I've forgotten. It will require you to give almost lessons from the whole letter. So it is the reason why sometimes epistles are easier. Then for section B, rather for part B, in most cases you will find that the parts may require you being tested with what we call common sense of a candidate, but it may not be connected to part A. So teachers have taught you, they have given you these notes, but usually part B, take caution about it so that you don't mess up. And then the last bit of this, I have said some questions require to give examples of personalities or sometimes current activities. So we want to try out some questions and we see how we respond to them. And that is why I asked my friends of Kanoni to give me some time. Why did I select these questions? I selected them basing them on sections. So in my presentation, I have a reason. The selected numbers, I was focusing on the question, the way it has come, and then how we approach this. So in your book, you should make a summary in line with how this is supposed to flow. Take an example. We have that question. Someone says, compare the gospel of Jesus to that of the apostles after his resurrection. And he puts any marks Let us assume it is probably 13. In your mind, please, candidates, just know that you are going to introduce it. But like I said, the introduction is going to depend on the nature of question. In this one, somebody may think is going to define resurrection. No, resurrection is not a key what? A key what? And anything you
Yes, I'm going to ask someone has the rights. Kindly, Napak, can you give me back the co-host rights? Napak Sid SS. Napak.
Yes, cousin.
Yes,
please.
give me the right.
The right
give me the rights.
what?
Make me a host. Yeah, because okay, let me do something. Channel. So first raise up your hand, channel. In that meeting.
I'm off internet.
Off internet.
I see Canon still raising up the hand. Raise up?
Hey, raise up. I want to make you unmute. You put the hand up.
So you know what doing that.
Oh, okay. Now.
So we want to apologize around the places where
Unmute.
it's not allowing you. So we want to apologize for those few minutes, these issues of technology. And I saw the people commenting that, it was time for supper. Senior Six says, let's not think about food now, but all will be well. We want to apologize, me and teacher Steven. I was taking this presentation basing on section. So I said in section A, I chose an area of comparing the gospel of Jesus to that preached by the The presentation shows that I'm supposed to handle similarities. Then I begin and say in both the message preached was universal. For example, showing both the Jews and Gentiles. Then I continue in both the gospel was preached orally, and to make my whole statement 1.5 line, I will say, but it was by word of mouth. Then I continue in both the emphasis was put on repentance of one whose sins and having a changed character. Then in both the importance of prayer was stressed. I expect you to now know that other side that requires explanation. Then in both the idea of enduring suffering and persecution was emphasized among the believers. The way I'm sharing this page, people, in both it emphasized that Jesus was the Son of God, and then I go on. If you look at my page, the way I've shared, I am emphasizing in both, because I am doing a comparison at the start. So please do not fail to do this throughout. Then if I can take us to the other side of where the differences lie, I would now say, however, it is different in the following ways. Then when I'm doing differences, I'll make use of while. So I say God, while the message also emphasizes Jesus as the Son of God. Is that a difference? Jesus' title, Son of Man, was common, while the message of apostles, the title Son of God, was common. I've already shown a difference. Jesus' message was preached by himself, while the apostles' message was preached by the many apostles. You can even cite out one example, because we say at the start, every point you give in this section, try to give out examples. By now, you all know which kind of apostles actually did preach. Then Jesus' message emphasized faith in God in order to become a believer, while the message of the apostles emphasized faith in Jesus. That's the difference. In Jesus' message, miracles were performed by Jesus himself, and you can actually bring out any example of a miracle, while in the message of the apostles, they performed the miracles by the power of the Holy Spirit. For example, you all know Peter, the miracles he performed, and then you bring out an example. Please do not forget to give examples. It is very, very key. Jesus' message was confined in Palestine, while that of the apostles was beyond the Gentile territories, because they kept on moving to different places. Then Jesus used parables to preach his message, and then the other side is different. The apostles used just Jesus' message instead, or carried out the teaching. Cite out an example of the parable. The message majorly emphasized the idea of the kingdom of God, while that of the apostles majorly emphasized the idea of Pelusia. So you go on and on. Then if I can go to another area, I want to treat question 2 as a gospel area. And if you remember, they asked to describe the event of Jesus's commissioning of the apostles, or the disciples, in the Gospel of Mark. So you have told me to describe. I must put an introduction. This time, I did not give you an introduction because I wanted you to put it in mind that introduction is part. So what are you going to introduce here? You're going to talk about Jesus' commissioning of the disciples, and you describe something brief. You don't need many lines. Then from there, you continue, because to go and preach the good news. These men came and chose to be with him. Then so that one would give support to the other. He went on to give them authority over the evil spirit, to cast out demons from all the people they were going to preach to. I'm describing. He ordered them not to take any bread, ordered them not to take beggars' bags or money in their pockets. They were to carry a stick on their journey, as Mark describes it. You continue like that throughout. There you'll have handled very well. But when I was giving the other part, I said you need to look at the parts that require common sense. For instance, if you look at part B, they asked to handle explaining the commitments expected of a Christian in a daily life. So I don't know whether my page is being seen properly. In my pages, I tried to show that if one is a Christian, then you have to show at the start and say a Christian is expected to, then you continue like that. You give all attributes that need a Christian to do to show that he's committed. And we are giving these attributes in line with the part A. That's what I talked about, that usually part B will follow how part A is crafted. So here my answers are brief because of time, but for you in your paper, write full statement and say Christian is expected to leave his family members, just like the disciples left. A Christian is expected to be ready to respond to God's call without hesitation, just like the disciples did not hesitate. Is expected to be ready to depend on God's providence. Is expected to be ready to preach the word of salvation. Is expected to cooperate with others, because Jesus had even told them they were supposed to work out with others. Is expected to be ready to suffer for the sake of the gospel. Now, this helps us to even know that the significance of Mark writing about this was that the disciples were not going to find, every work smooth. Certain areas were going to be challenging to them. Then you go on like that and like that. And please try your best to be on top of the game by writing as many points as possible. Then I want to share number 3. Like I said, I was looking at areas that concern emphasis. So I started with the oral period, then I went to the gospel, then I have that comparison. If you look at my question 3, let me share it here. It is talking about examining the moments where the disciples showed lack of understanding of Jesus's messiahship in the Gospel of Mark and John. So I now hinted on that would be probably number 5 or number 6. If you can look at my page, I still emphasize to talk about the introduction, and then I tried to show that the disciples' lack of understanding, if I'm going to talk about that, because that is the main theme. I said, look out for the main theme all the time. Is that part that shows the disciples, when in several occasions they failed to recognize the true identity of Jesus as the expected Messiah. Then I have finished my introduction. Now, whenever you find the question having the word Gospel of Mark, and then they put the word and John, please look out for separating the concepts. Please don't give them in the same regard, in the same paragraph, because of the conjunction used is and. So it means you're going to first show some in Mark, then thereafter you'll go for John. Battery. So here, start with Mark, then don't mix them. And you see, like here, you said in Mark, Jesus taught in parables, but they could not understand. This is a number that requires examples. Then you bring out an example. For example, for the parable of the sower, when they were alone, they asked to explain. If you don't remember the verses, it is okay, but at least that example works. When it came to the healing of a woman that was having hemorrhage or constant flow of blood, when Jesus asked who transfiguration, they were, when Jesus asked them, Peter suggested that they should build 3 tents. Then the denial of Jesus is a sign of lack of identity. When Jesus was at Caesarea, then Peter rebuked him. That is how Mark presents it. That is something called lack of understanding. Then when they failed to drive out evil spirits from a boy that came and lacked faith, again, that was lack of understanding. So you go on like that, but please look out for that conjunction of and. Once they say and, separate the two. First handle Mark, then thereafter handle John. Then when Jesus was walking on water, it was the same scenario. They thought he was a ghost. When he taught about divorce, they had to come back to him and ask him because they could not understand. When Judas betrayed Jesus, as Mark presents it, that was lack of understanding. Then Mark shows that when Jesus was being arrested in the last days, they all ran away. That was lack of understanding. Page. Then when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, So when you go to the other side of John, you also show how it is different. Please don't mix, because the whole intention was to see that conjunction word and. So at Jacob's well, they were surprised to see Jesus conversing with a Samaritan woman, and because Jesus was a Gentile, yet his message was supposed to come to all. Then when they brought food to the village of Samaria, they did not eat because they thought it was not supposed to be the case. Then Philip asked him to show his father. He talked about my father, and they could not understand. They were terrified or surprised when they saw Jesus walking on water. Then the same other disciple, Thomas, asked Jesus to show them the Father. You go on like that. Then, even when it is 13 marks, please just know that it will call for some bit of separation, and that's why comparison numbers are easy to handle. So part B, like I said, will require common sense. How do Christians manifest disloyalty to Jesus Christ today? There, you are supposed to explain how they go on doing that, because it is coming from part A. So here you show how they do it, or how they do it, and then you continue. And if we can go to another area, I have shared my would-be fourth question, because I have to talk about paper 1 as well. It is about the gospel. So please go on and look out for that. Now, when you go to the other areas that concern section C, I am sharing the other question that I have called or invited from Corinthians. That number talks about the resurrection, and they say, if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is yours. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 14, and they quote from any Bible. This time they use the NIV Bible. Now again, do not forget that I'll have to talk about the resurrection as a keyword. Look out for the keyword, it will be the introduction. So I have said this is where Corinthians were doubting the resurrection of Jesus, and as well as theirs. And why? They clarified this to Paul by writing to him, and that's why it is called Paul's letter to them, because they have areas that they talked about, asking him on certain things that were disturbing. But like a teacher has told you, some other areas were discovered by a lady called Chloe when he went and visited her. So then you go on and show. Now here they said, explain the message, the message in the above statement. When I'm explaining the message, I have to interpret why Paul went ahead to talk about this. The shared answers are clear there. I've said Paul meant that resurrection of Jesus is the basis of Christian preaching, because according to Paul, Christianity would not be preached if there was no resurrection. Then Jesus' resurrection is a major theme in the New Testament. So the whole idea of Christianity is not true if Christ had not risen. That's another meaning of such a statement. Jesus' resurrection is the basis of Christian faith, and therefore it is hard not if he had not resurrected, the faith of Christian would still be in delusion, or people would doubt. Then Paul meant that since Christ rose from death, even the believers would rise into eternal life. And then he said that death is not the end of their life, because they were to resurrect just like Jesus resurrected. Then the statement was made to enlighten them about the resurrection of Jesus, and as well as the believers. Then we also go on to see that some of the Corinthians were having different ideas about the destiny of a man or a person when he dies. They were wondering, where exactly does this person go after death? Then when you look at my part B, because of time, I have to also talk about paper 1. You'll discover that I am talking about the importance of Jesus' resurrection to Christians today. Now, when I'm going to give the importance, I am not going to see that I will say it should, because these are not lessons. So I will ensure I'm talking about the importance by showing, using words like confirms, proves. That's why I say Jesus' resurrection confirms to Christians today that Jesus is the Son of God, because it is now important. It proves that Jesus is the Messiah talked about in the Old Testament scriptures. It is a basis of preaching the gospel in church. Then it is a basis upon which Christians preach the gospel or the message about the second coming, which we call parousia. So if you look at my presentation, because I've shared them, you'll discover that I am giving importance to today, encourages, enables, helps, strengthens, gives. Those are the words that we are going to use. Then I have also put one question about the epistle, because I try to balance. Someone may say, you have not talked about Galatians. Me, I just talked about comparison area of oral tradition. And then I went to the gospel. I went to the comparison, which usually is number 5 and 6. Then I went to the other side of section C. I've shown one letter and I've shown one other area. So here under James, analyze the view that James's letter deals with real life issues. This is a very easy number because it concerns almost all things that Paul talked about. So in my analysis, I will ensure that I give the introduction about the keyword. The keyword were the real issues. Please treat yourself to giving just the meaning or the introduction all the time. And I have said real issues were daily practical areas of life that James handled in his life to the God's people scattered all over the world. Then I continue and then I show what talks about. So here I talk about what James mentioned. That's why I'm using advised, James advises, James teaches, and I go on. So James advised Christians to put their faith into actions. James advises Christians to endure trials and temptations in their lives. I ensure that my line is at least full. James advises Christians to put the word of God they hear into practice. Those are real life issues. Sometimes people do not preach, rather practice what they preach. James teaches that true religion involves taking care of the poor, orphans, and the widows. You're not going to give an example that widow at my village. No, leave it there. James to one another. James advises Christians to treat each other equally instead of discriminating the people based on their outward appearance. So I'm using the word advises like that. You keep on doing that continuously. Now, I must also put into consideration that there will be that other part that I call the part B, which will come and test your applicability of the content taught. That's why I've shared, explain ways in which Christians can use James's teaching in everyday life. My emphasis on choosing this area was to ensure that I tackle numbers that have the word ways. So when we are doing ways, we are going to see that I'll show the answering using through or with the Then you emphasize the ways by using through or by. So that is why I am putting those words. Christians can use James's teaching in everyday life by enduring trials and temptations. Christians can use James's teaching in everyday life by practicing charity or helping the needy. You go on like that by using their tongue properly, by treating each other with respect, since all are humans who are created in God's message. If I have not used by, then I'll use through loving one another, by living in a humble way. Whatever James talked about, please talk about it. So I want to go to the other area. Allow me, because it is now coming late, to talk about Divinity 1. Under Divinity 1, there is a difference. In paper 2, we have seen the two numbers are coming from section B in paper 2. But now in paper 1, please, like I said, inspection is something that makes us to pass. These numbers that are 2 are coming from section C. This is very, very bad for you not to read the instructions. Read them. Don't assume they will always be the same. They may change and you get surprised, but at least the norm has been that the two numbers of this section of this paper in the morning paper is usually the section C. That is the prophetic wisdom and wisdom literature. So here, something that looks the same is that both papers 1 and 2, introduction is a must, especially to part A. Please introduce. Look out for standpoints. Like I said, when they say ask to what extent or assessment, you'll have to show to a smaller extent or to a larger extent, like that. But when it comes to questions in this paper asking lessons, in this paper, please try your best to use should as a word that will accompany the lessons. Because when you do that, then the lesson will be, and then qualify these lessons by comparison. For example, if they ask, what lessons do Christians learn from Abraham's call? If I give an example, I will say Christians should respond to God's call. Then I don't stop there. Just as Abraham responded positively when God called him. If something is good, then I have to use just as, because it is done. If, for example, it is something bad, but it is a lesson to us, then I'll compare using the word unlike. Kindly remember this, because majority students follow only points of the pamphlets that do not bring out this comparison very well. Then for significance, importance, we shall use words helps, enables, encourages. Those are some of the words you have. An example, Christian virtues include patience. So if you are generating a lesson, you will say Christians should pray. So prayer, patience, unity, obedience, trustworthiness is part of those that should be near you. Then I have said much emphasis should be put on the section C that has wisdom and prophetic literature, because a student is supposed to use two numbers, and of which you all know that one of the numbers will be compulsory between 11 and 12. Either you are choosing Job or Psalms before you go on to choose any other number of the prophets. And please treat these with utmost importance, because for them they are direct. Job's issues are direct, as well as Psalms. So if you now read Psalms, you'll always know that they will ask either contents of a particular Psalm or what message it is, and the other part B will be the lesson. So stop hating that area. Because some people say, me, I'll never do sums, and they concentrate on one. You are risking. And lastly, I have said, if asked how beneficial, how applicable, how relevant, in this, we focus on the lesson. So I have put some trial questions, again, looking out for the sections needed. And here I have tackled part A. If you are asked, examine the implication of God's command to be fruitful and multiply. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. Implications. Remember, I have to something to do with the theme of the question. And I just show, then I go on. So I said, man had to undertake a marriage as a divine institution from God, and therefore God had initiated marriage when he created Adam and Eve. That is why he made them to say, go and multiply, be fruitful. So the implication was, it meant that marriage had to be accompanied by production of children, because when we talked about multiplication, that was the message. Marriage had to exist between man and woman so as to make it productive. That is why in that quotation, we are not showing that man was created only, there was some other person. Then sex in marriage is a gift from God to help man and woman produce the children. It is the reason why the two are created, and when they are two, they are expected to have sex. Then man and woman should take up monogamous marriage, since God created one man and then one woman at the beginning, because we are now giving implications. Then you go on like that up to when you finish that part. But keywords include you ensuring that you will share an introduction. Please remember that. So I've tried to share that. Then my part B, if you can see it, I have asked, how do some Christians abuse God's purpose for marriage today? So these Christians include men and women. Try to show those elements and say, like I've written today, men assume superiority over their women, whom they look at as subordinates. And that one is an example. Then domestic violence is evident, being characterized by fights or quarrels, which are very rampant in the families today. Then we are seeing polygamy at hand, yet God intended to show only marrying of one woman, but people are going on to marry more than one. Then there's too much hatred and bitterness in families today, yet God's intention was to promote harmony, and yet people keep on fighting with each other. Today, divorce is very common, but when you check Genesis chapter 1 and 2, God intended to make these marriages permanent, and therefore marriage becoming a permanent institution. Today, we are seeing separation among married couples, and it's very evident where a person feels free to stay alone, either way, as a man or as a woman. Sometimes some married partners have resorted to artificial birth control methods, yet God's intention was to tell them to go and multiply. So that is part of what you can handle as far as that part is concerned. Then remember what I talked about when we ask anything to do with an area. Part A is always the one that comes with the introduction. So I looked at another area just in case you're supposed to choose something to do with the introduction part of this paper. So in the first one, we have looked at Genesis. Then we now go to Abraham and then analyze the blessings Abraham received after God's call. Who are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about Abraham. Create your own introduction all the time. It is the reason why I have said introduction is key. Then try to bring out, in most cases, what you are going to talk about. So here, after giving, you go on straight and show the blessings that Abraham received. Like we said, received the new land of Canaan, where it was recorded that it was better than where they were because it was fertile. And of course, it ended up inheriting it, including the descendants. That was a blessing. He became a friend of God, and we said God helped him all the time in every situation he was faced with. If you took time and read all the 50 plus chapters of Genesis, then he became a founder of the great nation called Israel. And we all are aware that this nation started with him and as well as the descendants. So he became into covenant making with God, especially when he accepted to fulfill what God had asked him. And this covenant making was extended to his descendants, because ahead of us, we see that God went ahead to make covenants with the other people. Then you go on and on like that. So that is as far as A is concerned, but I'm interested in that part B. Under part B, if you look at the part B of it, I've shared those blessings. Abraham became blessed because he was rich with many servants. He became a source of blessing to mankind. He received spiritual renewal, like he changed from worshiping the many gods. Remember, he was a moon worshiper, to now worshiping the only Almighty. And in the Bible, is being talked about as a father of all nations. Then he was childless until when he begot a son, Isaac, who we know that became a heir thereafter. He received God's divine protection because God said, I'll curse those who curse you and bless those who bless you. Then he became famous and was respected. No wonder we look at his significance. He enjoyed God's favor and love. Then another blessing that no one should skip is he lived long, up to the life of 150, rather 75 years. And then he had an honorable death. We all are aware that sometimes some people die badly, but this one is reported having died peacefully. Then God promised that his descendants would become his own people, and on and on. Then afterwards, at the back of your mind, you must remember that there will be that part B that handles the section related to today. So here we said, how relevant is Abraham's life to Christians today? The relevant bit of it in this paper, you're going to use the lesson that comes out of it. So we say Christians should respond positively to the God's call as Abraham responded and accepted to leave his native land. Majority of the pamphlets you have been reading only have that area where you only see a point and you stop. Please compare. That's why I said accompany it where it is supposed to be. Christians should welcome God's commission as Abraham did when he accepted to go to Canaan, or mission. Christians should accept to change from their bad ways or practice, just as Abraham accepted to change from moon worshipping and only worshipped God. My statements are clear, are complete. They are not hanging. Christians should observe monotheism, as Abraham abandoned polytheism and adopted monotheism. I have accompanied my response as a lesson completed. Christians should worship God with zeal and commitment, as Abraham worshipped him or worshipped God. You continue like that throughout. Make sure you accompany your lessons, please. Christians should love their spouses like Abraham loved Sarah even when she was barren. You go on to continue. Now, when I go to another area, that is section B, I chose one number there, and that was to do with Samuel. If you remember my presentation, I said there will be numbers that will call for showing the standing point. So if I say, to what extent was the call of Samuel similar to that of Moses? Definitely in my mind, I know that they are going to require me to give similarities, and thereafter I'll give differences. But I have to introduce somewhere. What am I introducing? I either talk about who Samuel was, how he was brought, or even who Moses is. That's enough. Then I come and say, to a larger extent, because they have asked me to show the extent, the call of Samuel was similar to that of Moses, as seen below. Then you continue. Because I am doing similarities, I must use the word both. So because these are personalities, I will not say in both Samuel. I will say both Samuel and Moses were called when they were away from their homes. I don't stop there. I must show as an example, where was Moses or where was Samuel? Moses was at Mount Sinai Peninsula, and Moses was in Eli's house. In most cases, that is a sign to show similarity about the places. Both calls were initiated by God himself as a step towards bringing man to serve God. Then I continue like that until when I handle, because I need to hear from you later. That's why I'm brief. I hope you have seen my shared pages. So try your best to go through these slides. I know Teacher Stephen will share some of these with your schools. Then those are other additional shared similarities between the call of Samuel and Moses. That is section B. However, because the question was asking extent, then I have to come and say, to a smaller extent, the call of Samuel and Moses was different as seen below. When I'm doing differences, I'm going to handle with while as a word or conjunction. So I'll say Moses was given the power to perform miracles, while Samuel was given prophetic authority to speak God's message. And then I have finished. Moses was called while taking care of the sheep of Jethro, while Samuel had already entered the service of God. That is enough to show the difference. Then during the call of Moses, Moses was given a helper, and we all know that the helper was Aaron. And then in the call of Samuel, he did this task alone. Moses was an adult when God called him, while Samuel was a young boy, because you all remember he was in a sleep, and then God came 3 times or more than 3 until when he realized, when he kept on reporting to Eli. So you show that continuously. But we must remember that there will be that other part, which I said will be related to the other part. So how should Christians today respond to God's call? The tense there is should. So I'm supposed to say, Christians should depend on God in all their provision in the ministry. Then I say, just as I continue. Christians should live holy lives so as to please God. Anything that is good, the Christian should do is what you go by. As you see me sharing the pages there. I know majority of you are going for supper, so that's why I'm asking. Then when I go to the other section, there would be last section, that is section C. I have picked analyzing the prophet Amos' teaching about the day of the Lord. So here my introduction will talk about the day of the Lord. This is another good number that is easy to do. Then you just say, Amos said, the day would be full of darkness, where towns and streets would see the sun at dawn, at noon rather. Then he said it would be a day when Israel would be defeated by her enemies, because the Lord would no longer protect Israel. That's what Amos. You don't create your own words, you speak exactly what Amos said. Amos said on that day, man would run away from a lion, but would meet a bear and would suffer the consequences. Just imagine meeting such an animal. It is energetic, it was therefore supposed to tear you into pieces. Then according to Amos, there will be wailing rather, and sorrow in all parts of Israel. Then Amos said it would be a day of total disaster, and he said the songs of praise would turn into songs of anguish. Then he said the day would be like parents mourning for their children or for their own child, and they would have bitter feelings. He said on that day Israel would be taken into exile for having taken, people for granted. Then he said their Baal, not Baal, but Baal, and the idols that the people were worshipped would be destroyed as a punishment. There would be hunger, so that on that very day people would move from one place to another and look for something to eat, and nothing to eat. You continue like that. Then part B is where I want to emphasize and explain the ways in which Christians should prepare for the day of the Lord. Again, the word is ways. Once they talk about ways, remember you're going to say Christians should prepare it through. Christians should prepare it by. Christians should prepare it by. So here I'm brief to show that by, through is going to be a key word there. By being faithful in marriage, by being sober or drinking modestly, there you are preparing for the day of the Lord. By respecting their bodies as God's temple, by repenting of their sins so that they are forgiven, by accepting to be baptized. Anything good that the Christians do is recorded there. By preaching like that. Then the last number before I hear from you, because it is coming to 6, is to analyze Job's response to his suffering. Please create your small 1.5 line introduction about Job. That's why I've said introduction, and I left the gap there. Speak about how Job responded. Job responded in both good and bad ways, but this time the response is is supposed to come at once. So Job maintained his faith in God despite his suffering. That is a response. He realized that his relationship with God was that of a creature and a creator. He wished that God would turn his birthday into a day of darkness. Job wished that God would remove this day from the calendar. Job wondered why God would let him go on living in misery. Job kept his trust in God and did not depend on human response. He said that God had become unfair by causing the endless agony to him, yet he was an innocent man. He regretted why his mother conceived him, and he said perhaps he would not be suffering if his mother did not conceive. Job admitted having questioned God's wisdom. That's why at first Job complained, but eventually realized so anything that is good and bad is also a response. But we must remember that there is that part B. How do Christians today respond to suffering in light of Job's experience? That word is in light, not highlight. So here, it is like teaching us how we should behave. Again, how should. First of all, I will use should, but I will also show the way. Christians should respond to suffering through taking suffering as part of life. Christians should respond through praying to God as Job prayed. Christians should respond to suffering through seeking for God's forgiveness as Job. You maintain and continue. So I want to stop here and allow very many of you whose hands I saw at the start. Thank you for the attendance, but I hear from you and we go for supper. So I want to start from Yisinjiro. Please unmute and talk to me. Yisinjiro SS. Please unmute. Okay. Isinjiro seems not to be on. Kanoni SS. Please unmute and talk. Kanoni SS. Okay. Then I see Chirigwajo SS. Unmute, please, and raise your concern. Saint Chirigwajo. Hello. Hello. Saint Chirigwajo, are you hearing me? Okay. Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, thank you for the facilitation. But then my
Yes.
concern is
Mm.
what do we put on questions asking circumstances? Because we have attempted many mock bodies and they're like, we put factors and others are saying we narrate.
Mm.
Then we need to know what is the real content to put there.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get another person.
Amugu secondary. Amugu secondary. Kanoni unmute. Amugu secondary. Kanoni unmute.
Chirukira no irukira.
Amugu unmute.
Okay. My question is in paper 2. There's a
Yes.
question that I came across that says, contrast the worship in the early church and worship in the churches of today.
Yes.
This question, if you're to answer, what I know is that it requires you to talk about the early church, that is the past. Then, of course, today's church, it is present. So I would like to actually ask, in the part of the differences, how would your paragraph look like?
Okay, thank you. Is there any other person coming? As people are coming, let me respond to the two so far. Now, the one who asked about circumstances, I said when they ask for circumstances, like for instance in the early church, here you are going to give reasons. That is if it is the early church. But if it comes and they are asking about circumstances in the Gospels, then you are going to narrate, because the circumstances under the Gospels call for narration. Then if it is epistles, circumstances that led to James to do this, you are going to give reasons. So be clear with that. Reasons work in early church and epistles, but narrations of work in the Gospels if it comes to question of circumstance. Then somebody who asked about comparison of early church and then the church today, like I said, I actually shared this. I said start with the similarity and say in both, but when you come to your other paragraph and difference, you'll say, for example, in the early church, baptism was by immersion, whereas churches today, baptism is by use of. Then you mentioned the method of baptism, because in some churches today, now that we don't have rivers, people just use sprinkling of water. Then if it is oral, the method of transmission of the message in the early church, the message was transmitted orally, while today churches are using modern means. So you just compare with the word while. Let me pick up other people. Did I pick Brethren's Memorial? Please unmute. Brethren. Brethren. Okay. Saint Annie's Chihai. Please, if you are on, unmute and speak. Hello. It seems people are not on. They are going for supper.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful moment of facilitation.
Yes.
The only main question that I would like to ask is, Job's suffering was more of a psychological torture than a physical torture. How can we approach such a question in case it comes in human? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now, so for such questions, you'll discover that it is two-sided, because it is asking for the side that affected this person, Job, and then the other side that talks about other factors that came. So when you're answering that, you will ensure that you define or you talk about Job himself, Then the psychological part are those areas that did come from his thinking, his mind. So, for instance, him questioning that it was not proper for him not being made to go through such suffering because he was a little holy. That is part of psychological. But we have other reasons that contributed. So that's how you would handle. I have seen that question in many of the mock bodies, and somehow, somewhere, it looks confusing when people try to answer it, but that is how you should answer such an area. So I don't know whether Isingiro is on. Isingiro, please unmute and ask.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, once again. You answered my question, but then there is also that part of the similarity part of it. That is in relation to the question I gave you about the comparison between the worship in the early church and then today's church. So could you please tell me about the similarity part of it, how my paragraph will look like? Thank you so much, sir.
So when I'm giving similarities, my friend, I'll use the word both. In both the early church and the modern churches, there is this, so that when I'm explaining in the early church, I will use past tense, then I come and I show present in the same line. There are things, for example, that are similar in both churches. For instance, there is baptism across, then there are missionary journeys in both churches. For example, in both churches, in both the early church and the modern church, there is making of holy journey. In the early church, then you go and say, they used to make holy missionary journeys to such a place. While today, in the churches, people make missionary journeys to such a place, like you already know holy places we go to, or Christians go to, like Namugongo. So there I have given my example, but within the same line. So in the other area, I'll use past, and then when I'm referring to the church, I'll use present. But the key word is using both. 6 p.m., I'm very sure even you need to go for something else. Please allow me to stop here, because we are supposed to be engaged for another activity, but I want to thank you for the wonderful audience, and I apologize for the hiccups that came between the network issues and then power fluctuations that kept on switching me off. All I know, Teacher Stephen will share my recording, but also my presentation. I had put slides because I was rushing. Look out for the answers. They can enrich our revision, and at least we know what to do. Thank you, the teachers, the school administrators, for labeling to ensure that the Ugandan A-level students that are crowning this old curriculum make wonders. And I want to wish you big success, and thank you for the attendance. Yeah, I'm done. I'm going for duty now. So when Teacher Stephen comes, you tell him I'm done.
It's like in all the senior one stream that is in this, and they are kids. We can't be enough for all the classes. I'll read and bring back. That is okay. There is no lesson that day. Yes. But you can't be it is a small job. Are you at least sitting, pray? I really didn't even maybe. You will come for it. tomorrow if they are returned, great. Use it during break when we return again. After a while, lesson tomorrow after say
Saint Teresa goes. Saint Teresa.